Morning, everyone. I'm Dickson, and I'm thankful that you're joining me again today for another session of our structure fishing workshop. A little bit different today, as you can see. My son called me up, my oldest boy, Don, he called me up and wanted me to take a look at his lake as far as the seasonal movement of the fish right now. I said I would do it, and I had this day set aside for that purpose. And my wife actually is off today, so she's here with me, and we came out here this morning and we were going to start fishing. And she said, you know what, rather than shooting your vlog tomorrow, why don't we just shoot it here on the water? I said, okay. So today what we want to do is continue our discussion on the basic movements of fish. We touched on the last time we talked about the details of a daily movement for the bulk of the season. In other words, the warmer season. And we covered that pretty thoroughly. And I wanted to bring out first thing this morning that fish not only move from a daily standpoint, but they also move from a seasonal standpoint. And during the colder season, and the pre-spawn and the spawn, fish are located in different areas. Now, when it comes to the seasonal movements of a fish, walleyes, northern pike, muskie, white bass, stripers, trout, salmon, all of these species of fish will move great distances to spawn. Not unusual. I've seen walleyes move 50 miles. Buck said he's seen them move close to 100 miles to spawn. And we'll talk more about those species of fish and their seasonal movements at a later time. But as you remember from our early discussions, now we're using as our study fish a largemouth bass. And the largemouth is a little bit different than the other species when it comes to seasonal movements. They won't go nearly as far as the other species. In fact, Buck used to just say, a largemouth bass, we need to mentally sort of think of him as living his entire life in the same general area. He'll move seasonally, but he won't go nearly as far as the other species. So today we're going to cover that seasonal movements of the largemouth bass. And the first thing we need to do as we look at the warmer season versus the colder season, it's important to note that the seasonal sanctuary zone of a largemouth, it's a lot deeper in the colder season than it is in the bulk of the season, in the warmer season. So I'd like to establish this right off the bat. The average sanctuary zone for the largemouth bass in the winter months, in the colder season, if this much water is available in your lake, it would be around 60 feet. Now, if you don't have 60 feet in your lake or your reservoir, then this deep water sanctuary will be in the deepest water in the lake. And as we brought out in our earliest studies, Buck used to say the fish are in the deepest water in the lake, deepest water in the area of a lake, or the deepest water available. On my son's lake here, the deepest water in this lake's 30 feet. You got one area where there's 30 feet of water. It's the deepest water in the lake. Home of the fish during the colder season. There's another area of his lake over here that has 25 foot of water in it, and that would qualify as the deepest water in an area of this lake. Winter months, that's the home of the fish. But I want to take you through a normal situation. In most waters in this country, if you have 60 feet, that's the home of the fish during the winter months, during the colder season. Now, when these fish are in this 60 feet of water, at a time of the year when things are very volatile as far as that fish is concerned, he doesn't like it much. And his activity periods or his movements are very, very short and scattered. When they do become active and move, they only move for maybe 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes, and right back down into that sanctuary. It just doesn't last very long. So conversely, that translates to catching fish at this time of year pretty difficult. It's tough, and rightfully so. But most of us aren't fishing at that time of the year. However, When the season first opens, and I should touch on this too, some states have the foresight to close the season during the spawn, and I like that. Pennsylvania is one of those. They really manage their resource, in my opinion, in the right way. But in some states, like Florida, there's no season, so you can fish anytime. And there are a bunch of other states the same way. However, most of us aren't fishing at this colder season, so we're not too concerned. But when the season first opens and you're ready to go bass fishing, and if you're way up north, once the ice is out and you're ready to go, you have to be thinking in terms of this steeper bank. They go this direction during the colder season. They go towards the steeper banks. And keep in mind, those movements in the pre-spawn are going to be short and scattered. They won't last very long. In many cases, just a few minutes, right back downstairs. Very difficult time. However, if we're looking to locate these fish during the colder season, or as we first get into the pre-spawn, we're going to be looking at the steeper banks. That's where they're going to be. Now, important to note right here, we're not just going to fish any steep bank. I've been in reservoirs and lakes where you could go miles and miles and miles and have a steep bank, but there's no structure. So you got no fish. You know, when we first started our study a few months ago on structure, we talked about when you look at a lake, any lake, our key to finding a fish is structure. Well, if we don't have structure, we don't have fish. We've established that. Buck established that years ago. It's just the way it is. So as we look at this seasonal movement, if I'm looking at a steep bank, if there's no structure in conjunction with this steep bank, I'm not going to fish that steep bank. So here's your key. When I'm looking for my pre-spawn bass, the first thing I do is I locate my number one favorite, best looking summertime structure. That's my guide even in the seasonal movements. And so if I know I'm looking for a steep bank, but I know I have to have structure to have fish, I locate my summer stuff. And then I look for the closest place where the deepest water swings closest to the bank in relationship to my summertime structure. And that's where I'm going to start my pre-spawn fishing, on that steep bank. It's in direct relationship. Remember I said, bass won't go very far when they move seasonally. Not like the other species, they won't go far. So I'm using my summer structure as my guide as to where these fish are going to be seasonally. So once I fish along that steep bank, if you're in a natural lake, you'll come to a point where there's going to be a bay swinging back in. If it's a reservoir, you're going to come to a point after following that steep bank a ways, there'll be a side feeder stream cutting back up in there. Side cut. And normally at the head of that side cut, or at the head of that bay, there'll be a little bar. And you can find some fish there. Again, depending on how far along these fish are. Now, once that water starts to warm up, and those fish are moving closer and closer to actually going back, fanning the beds and laying their eggs and doing their thing, I'm going to be looking all along that side feeder stream cut, all up in the shallows, all the way as far as I can go up into that cut. I'm looking for the spawning fish. And then if I'm in a bay, same way. I'm looking all the way up into the most shallowest areas of that bay, looking for my spawning fish. But again, that cove or that feeder cut or that steep bank on their way getting to that cove or feeder cut is all in conjunction with my summertime structure. That's my key to finding seasonal bass. I'm not just going to fish any cove. I'm not just going to fish any side feeder stream cut. I'm fishing the closest cove, the closest cut to my summertime structure. Pre-spawn, I'm fishing the steepest bank in relationship to my summertime structure. So isn't it funny? It's strange that my guide to seasonal bass is still summertime structure. If I have no structure, I've got no fish. Those fish aren't going to come. Those bass will not come from 20 miles away to come up to your feeder stream cut if there's no structure. They're not coming. That's not what they do. Keep in mind, Buck says, a bass I think of generally spending his entire life in the same general area. They don't move very far. Now, once this spawn is over, they've laid their eggs and they're leaving those beds and they come back out, they end up going back to the home sanctuary area the same way they got there. That's how they're coming back. And they go down into that deep water sanctuary. Now, it's important to note right here that this post-spawn period, it's what Buck Perry always referred to as the toughest time of the year to catch fish. Post-spawn. The spawn takes an awful lot out of a fish. And when they get back and drop down into that deep water sanctuary, they're very dormant. And they stay that way normally about 3 weeks. It's pretty difficult trying to catch a fish post-spawn. It's hard. They're just very, very dormant. They're recovering. But once that water warms up sufficiently to a depth of 30 to 35 feet, that will trigger the summertime movements and back again to the more gradual sloping stuff. And the fish will stay in that position until the snow flies. I'm talking about all summer long till the snow flies. This is where we're fishing over here. But in that colder season, keep in mind for bass, pre-spawn, I'm looking for a steep bank. I'm looking for the place where the deepest water swings closest to the bank in relationship to my summertime structure. There's my pre-spawn fish. And the very first side feeder cut in the reservoir or cove in a natural lake that cuts back in off of that steep bank, there's my spawning fish. When it's over, back down home, post-spawn, doldrums, when it gets really tough. And then when the water warms to 30, 35 feet, we're in the summer patterns and it stays that way until the snow flies. And my friends, that's the seasonal movement of the bass. I hope that clears a bunch of stuff up for you. Don't just fish any steep bank. Don't just fish any feeder stream cut. Don't just fish any bay for the bass. Fish the ones in relationship to your summertime structure. Bottom line is, structure is our guide in any body of water, any season of the year. Structure is our guide as to where the fish are going to be. So mark that all down. I hope you learned a little something. And thanks for being with me. I'm going to get fishing now since I told my wife, okay, we'll do this. I hope I made some sense. I hadn't been a chance. I don't have a chance to edit this sitting out here in the boat. But at any rate, I hope you got the message on seasonal movements of the bass. And the next time we get together, I'm going to cover the seasonal movements of all the other species. So thanks for being with me today. Appreciate you. And I want you to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram and be sure to subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and we'll see you the next time.